Right.
And and again, welcome to Jeff Weber from the Training and Technical Assistance Center at George Mason University for what families need to know about assistive technology. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Kelly. My name is Jeff Weber. I am the Assistive Technology Coordinator at TTAC. Some of you may have heard of us before just because of all the work that we do with the schools. We've been partners with Form Families Forward for many years, so I'm very excited to be able to do this presentation for you guys tonight. A little bit about what TTAC does. We provide training and technical assistance to all of the school divisions across the state. And there is a center located in every superintendent's region. Certain centers cover two regions, but because our region is such a big region, Region 4 is about 1/3 of the school age population, we get Region 4 all to ourselves. And if you're wondering where these TTACs are located, they're usually located at the main university in that region. So for Region 4, we're officed at George Mason University, specifically at that same campus, the Manassas campus that Kelly mentioned the event was happening at. So let's get started, all right, with no further ado. Tonight, we're going to be talking about assistive technology. So when I'm talking about assistive technology, um, most people think about devices, right? And that is the very first thing that it does encompass. And these are devices that are going to help your students have access to free, appropriate public education. It allows them access to general education curriculum. It gives them opportunities to have meaningful social interactions, facilitates progress towards their educational goals, and it can also be significantly impacting their independence, their communication, their self-expression, their self-esteem, and just their overall quality of life. So there's resources to support IEP teams in making decisions about what are the best assistive technologies to select. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the process later on. But what makes assistive technology a law that schools are required to follow is called IDEA. And IDEA places equal weight on devices and services. So the AT device can be any piece of equipment that can be purchased or acquired, um, either manufactured or made, even. But then you have your services. So services could include uh, things like AT evaluations, purchasing and leasing devices, repairing the devices, coordinating with other programs, training and technical assistance for the student or the family or any professionals who work with the student. It's going to be important that the AT devices are defined and services are going to be defined on the student's IEP. So sometimes IEP teams are really enthusiastic about identifying devices, but they sometimes overlook the important services that provide the training to make sure that everybody knows how to use it. Because one thing that we don't want is to spend all this money on a device, but then have it end up on the shelf collecting dust. So one thing that is not part of assistive technology would be surgically implanted medical devices or the replacement of these devices. So one often associated medical device is the cochlear implant that provides uh, people with who are deaf or severely hard of hearing. Something that's handled by a doctor would fall outside of our domain. Now, assistive technology has been around for a long time. Uh,
Jeff, Jeff, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but this was a timely question. I know you said you didn't mind if I just popped in, but in terms of what counts as assistive technology, what doesn't, we have a question about an ASL interpreter. Would that be considered assistive technology?
no, an ASL interpreter would be an accommodation.
Great.
Uh,
Thank you.
an assistive technology would be a device or a tool.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. So I was just going to give you a little history, some interesting trivia here. The first eyeglasses were made in northern Italy around 1290. In that little diagram there, ear trumpets uh, were used for the partially deaf. Those date back to the 17th century. Uh, that uh, that iron hand was from 218 BC, sometime during the Second Punic War. So people have been using these devices for a very long time. So assistive technology exists on a continuum. So our minds may immediately jump to sophisticated electronics like computers or iPads or AAC when we hear the term assistive technology, but it actually encompasses a range of tools starting from the no tech to the low tech, all the way up to these dynamic high tech devices that I just mentioned. So in the past, we considered beginning with low tech materials, but now with the integration of technology and assistive technology that's become so commonplace in all of our handheld devices and Chromebooks and tablets, the answer to some reading and writing challenges is a lot of times more easily accessible through these apps, which means we don't always begin with low tech. In fact, many students begin from using high tech, but we just want people to consider the whole spectrum when deciding tools and not rule out any part of the spectrum. Just because something is low tech or high tech doesn't mean it's better or worse or uh, than the other. They're just different options and they all have their place. So following the continuums, this is showing the continuum as it applies to AAC. You can see here on the left side, right? We got trying to move my notes out of the way so I can read this here. So on the left, we got these things like pencil grips and post-it notes in the low tech section. In no tech, I mean in the low tech, those are things that would be we I tend to call these like the battery operated type devices. They might have some electronics, but they're not like running computer software. Versus the high tech, which would be your iPads, uh, your text to speech, your progress monitoring software, that sort of thing. When it comes to the AT continuum for literacy, uh, this would include slant boards, adaptive pencils for writing. Um, in the mid section, you start to get to magnification or audiobooks. As you get to high tech, you're talking about text to speech um, and voice recognition apps. So you'll notice that the digital devices now fall on the mid tech category, whereas digital devices used to all be considered high tech. So that's one of the changes. Is just technology advances ever forward. So, and this chart here reflects the augmentative alternative communication continuum. So, for students who require or are building skills to use a robust vocabulary, we might begin with high tech options like the iPad with AAC apps like LAMP or Proloquo to Go or Touch Chat, Cough Drop. What's important is that it's a collaboration with the IEP team, and that's going to include speech and language pathologists. That's going to include the family, and potentially, anybody that the family is bringing, like an advocate, to consider the preferences of the student when making these decisions. All right. So, assistive technology is something that can support students in all these many areas, including academic areas, social areas, communication, mobility. This list right here is just a small sampling of some of the things that it can touch on. It also helps students achieve academic success, increases their participation in the curriculum, improves their independence at home, and just gives them a lot. It reduces the frustration and some of the behavioral challenges that sometimes you'll see. Um, it's also considered what what in Virginia we call these the high leverage practices in special education, and these are the things that we strive to have all of our teachers and schools implementing, just to make sure that we're providing the best quality education standards. So this assistive technology is high leverage practice number 19. Now, there was a research study. It's done in 2016, so it's starting to get a little bit old, but it still holds true that AT is currently under-identified and underused in students with IEPs. So, a book states that only 5% of students nationwide with IEPs are using AT in school. And this is important research that shows that the impact of using text to speech with students with disabilities, it's something that can improve reading comprehension and rates and time spent on reading. And I see some comments appearing in the chat. So if there's any questions, feel free to let me know. All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, so the AAC is something that can really have a big impact. And as an intervention tool, it can lead to improved education, employment, community participation, independent living outcomes. Here's some stats from that study that I was mentioning earlier that are pretty interesting. So, uh, this is the graduation rate of students who received AT. All right. That's it without AT. Pretty big difference, right? This is post secondary enrollment with AT. Students without AT, even bigger discrepancy. For a paying job, yeah. So now you can see just how important it is that students get access to this assistive technology. It really is going to make such a big difference in their life beyond school. So student shame is another area of research that's connected to reading success. So continued difficulty and failure to learn to read in the first few years is something that has a profound impact on children's feelings of competence and confidence. So a lot of us have seen these emotional responses in students, like where they hide their heads, or they don't want to read out loud, or they avoid reading activities. On the other hand, students report that when they use AT to help them with reading challenges, then they're going to be more motivated to read, uh, more motivated to read and listen to text, and just their general motivation for schoolwork increases. All right. I'm gonna skip because we're short on time. I'm gonna skip some of the group discussion sections so that we have time for Q&A at the end, if that's okay. So so IDEA, as I mentioned earlier, mandates that AT be considered. So the consideration of AT, it's intended to be a short discussion that takes place during IEP meetings. Um, and it's going to determine whether or not AT devices and services are adequate, or if new devices, tools, and services would be beneficial. It should be a careful but thoughtful discussion of the student, and it's going to include their abilities and needs. It's going to talk about the environments that the student goes into, tasks that they're being asked to perform, and then how tools, both devices and services, can support the student in accessing that free, appropriate public education and reaching their goals. So, in the consideration process, the teams are going to take a look at existing data, and that could be from AT that they've tried, or devices or services that are required by the student to access. And the consideration of the AT should, again, reference that continuum that I had mentioned from low to high, and also make sure that the IEP team considers the AT needs not just in the school setting, but also at the home setting and any other setting that the student might be going to. So these are some of the resources, and we're providing a PDF of these slides so you can have access to these to check out later. But these just give you resources of various AT solutions, modifications, accommodations that you can try for different areas of need. Um, and it's going to also provide the consideration guide, which is a tool that we created for IEP teams to facilitate this conversation that I'm talking about. And I'm going to go a little bit into what this consideration guide looks like now and talk to you guys a little bit about what the consideration process even is. So this is what we call the VATS, the Virginia Assistive Technology Tools and Strategies Consideration Guide. So this is a form that's linked to from your student's IEP if your school uses Virginia IEP, which a lot of schools do. Not some school divisions use their own IEPs, and that's fine. Um, Virginia is kind of flexible in that regard and giving schools the freedom to choose their own preferred methods as long as uh, they're following all the requirements. The state doesn't really care which forms they use. But this one right here, just to give you an idea of the kind of discussions that should be having, I'm going to use this as the example. So in this, so after you put in the demographic information about the student, you'll notice there's all these different check boxes for different areas of need that could be identified, like communication, reading, auditory processing. So it might be the case that your student has a lot of areas of need. Um, However, within the course of a single IEP meeting, it's usually more effective to have a deeper conversation about just one or two or maybe three at the most. Um, so that way you can actually dig into those areas a little bit and ask more meaningful questions about the challenges the students facing and start to get to brainstorming some ideas about how we can help the student. So you take those areas of need that you've identified, the boxes that you've ticked, and you're going to list them down here. And there's three columns in case that you picked three areas of need. But what we're doing here is something called the SET framework. And SET is an acronym for student, environment, tasks, and tools. And this was a framework that was created by an uh, an AT specialist named Joy Sabala. She's no longer with us, but her work continues on. Um, and before you start brainstorming and jumping right to, oh, I think we should do this tool, or oh, I heard somebody in the other classroom was having success with this. Let's try that. You really want to stop and use the SET framework so that you can first create a very complete picture of the student. And that'll really, if you do this first, this will really help you in the long run in terms of finding the right tool. So when you talk about the student in the student section, you're going to be reflecting on your students' strengths, their interests, any needs that are related to the area of concern in this row. It's going to be important that you consider both the strengths and the needs in order to guide you guys to the right tool. Now, when you're talking about environment, that's the next column. You're going to be describing the environments that are related to that area of need. So this might include the places where the student is, the items that are within that environment. It might include the layout of the room if that's going to impact the student, potentially any people within that environment. And don't forget to think about sensory details like noise level or lighting, in addition to relevant technology and internet availability. So this is all stuff that can affect what tools you're going to want. Uh, Now it comes to tasks. So all of these tools are usually being chosen with the intention of helping the student to accomplish a specific task. So you're going to want to think back to that area of concern that was identified and what is the specific task or goal that the student's having difficulty accomplishing or achieving. So it's important to really drill down to the specific task rather than just a general area of difficulty. So, for example, if executive functioning is identified as the area of need, what skill does the student find difficult? Is it remembering the order of assignments? Is it staying on task? Is it organizing the materials? And then find out what other assignments or activities are being required for the student in order to be able to engage in this. And then finally, after you've reflected on those three previous areas, now you can start to think about tools, but you don't just jump to name brands. Again, we have a special kind of way of looking at it where we do it feature first. We call it feature matching. I like to think of it as creating a wish list for your dream tool, whether it exists or not. You don't even know what tools are out there, but you know, if the perfect tool did exist, it would include A, B, C, D. It would include all these features that you know would help your student. So if you can list those features out and then take a look at the tools that are available, you'll be able to easily see which tool has embodies the features on your wish list best. All right, so um, skip this slide here. I think that kind of restates what I already said. And I'm also going to skip this video that explains feature matching in more detail because I don't think we have time for that. But I can, in a nutshell, I can explain what happens in this video. She has a document, a feature matching document that she's filling in, and she gives an example um, of a area of need, and she starts listing the features that she would want for it. Um, and then she lists various tools, and then it's like a spreadsheet. She just starts checking the boxes where those two where the feature and the tool intersect, and it becomes really clear when you see which tool has the most check boxes for all your wish list features. Then that becomes the winner. And here's the thing: in the consideration process on paper, sometimes there might be an obvious tool. Oh, this is the one that has all the features that we want. This is the one. But sometimes there's unforeseen reasons why that tool might not be the best option. Um, you might try it and it's just not as successful with the student just because it's a little cumbersome, or maybe the size of it is wrong, maybe the color of it is wrong, or maybe they just don't like the menu screen. There's a million different reasons why a student might prefer a different tool, even though it doesn't have as many bells and whistles or cool features that you would put on your feature matching wish list. So it's always nice to have another option, maybe a plan B or a plan C, so that you try the first one, and if it doesn't work out, then you move on to the next one, and even possibly the third one if necessary. So just like you wouldn't use a chainsaw to cut a pizza, it's all about finding the right tool for the job. So some of the things that you want to consider in terms of the qualities of the tool, those less obvious ones, um, taking into consideration the portability of the device. You know, how much does it weigh? Things that are really heavy and going to tire you out if you're having to lug it from room to room versus something that you could just easily fit in your front pocket. Uh, this is something you're going to have to be charging all the time. How long does it hold a charge? Is it going to be able to stay charged all day long, or are they going to be running to get their charger cord every 30 minutes? How long does it take to set up if you're going into a new environment? Would you take it to a party? I love that question because you know our kids really care about things like how uh, their devices impact them, especially if it makes them stand out from their peers. They might not like that. Another consideration would be the durability. So this is something to consider depending on the student's behavior, depending on the environment that it's in, or even just accidents that happen. I mean, these devices can be really expensive. A lot of them can cost hundreds, sometimes even thousands of dollars. So you want to make sure if it is a really expensive device and it is fragile, you have a plan in place to protect it from damage if it gets dropped. Is there a protective case it can go into, or a cord that you can attach it to keep it from falling off the desk? Um, is there a replacement plan offered by the manufacturer, or a device insurance plan that you might want to look into? Um, is there something that you can have the student use if the device needs to be repaired and it's away? These are considerations to take into account. So another one would be accessibility. So this would be, students sometimes have very specific ways that they access their device where it needs to be positioned in a very specific way, or they need something that they can touch with their fingers. Maybe they don't have a lot of strength in their fingers, so they can't push hard. It needs to be a light touch. Um, if it's an AC device, sometimes they can't directly select the item that they want. So they need a device that can scan for them, where the selection field will move automatically until they tell it to stop. And does it have features that give you just general ease of use? The style. Oh, this is not just how cool it is, but this is um, things like are you presenting pictures versus objects or photos versus symbols? Um, recorded, that kind of computery voice versus an actual human's recorded voice. Uh, what what do you want it to sound like? Um, if you have like a really little guy, you might not want to give him the largest iPad on the market. He can barely fit under his arm. Um, making sure that it's a match for the student in that regard. Um, one of the one of the supplemental resources that we have a link to here. This is the VATS resource guide, and this is something that you can look at after you've done the feature matching process. So it might be helpful to identify potential tools or strategies. It's available as an accessible digital guide. There's also a table version that you could print out. So if your division doesn't have access to a device that's in here, you can always check with your local TTAC, um, that'd be us, and see about getting a device from our AT lending library. We check devices out to teachers. We don't check them out directly to family members, but you can request the teacher to put in a device request. Absolutely. This is an example of how that AT resource guide is broken down. So you can see here, there's in the left column instructional or sample tasks listed, and then they provide a column of the standard tools that would be used to address those tasks. Then it gives a column of modifications and accommodations. And then in the last column are AT tools and supports. So you have selected the tool that your team's decided that you want to try with a student. You're ready to fill in the T area of that set framework box on the form, the tools box, and you can list the choice. So that brings you to the next part of this VATS form. This is where you sort of make a plan. So the team has engaged in the set discussion, and then they've identified the areas of need. And then what they're going to do is answer these questions of whether a device exists, if the existing tools and strategies are appropriate for that area of need, or if appropriate tools and strategies are required, or if trials are needed to identify a tool, or if additional information is needed. So this was basically something that we did to give more options to answer the question, is AT needed? Yes or no, which is how the question used to be posed. What we found was sometimes people would would answer that question without having a thoughtful conversation. So we wanted to spread out the the question a little bit with more options just to facilitate a deeper conversation. And once a decision has been made for each area of need, then what you do is you're going to want to start filling in an action plan of how you're going to get this tool into the student's hand and onto their IEP. So having a clear plan is going to increase your chances of success during the trial. So the first you're going to list the tool that your IEP team has decided to trial, and you're going to think about what needs to be done to have a successful trial. For example, what do you need to get the device and set it up? Um, Documents are going to be needed. Are there any accessories that you need that are going to be needed to be acquired? Um, who needs to be notified about the details of the trial? Identify who's going to be responsible for each element. It, a lot of times it's the classroom teacher most of the time, but sometimes it might be the speech and language provider that's going to be helping, especially if it's a communication device. Um, Making sure that everyone who works for the student is there's a plan in place to provide them training, including you guys, the family, and on how to use the device, and identify the amount of time for the trial uh, needed to come up with an answer of whether the tool is working or not, and then plan to come back together after that time um, and set a date and make sure that it's a good idea to do it while everyone is there at the table. So sometimes, sometimes when you do come back, the results that you get determine that the tool is good, and then you can document it in the IEP. But sometimes it's going to tell you that you need to try something else, um, and that's okay. It's an iterative process. It's a learning process. There's new tools coming out constantly, so it's one of the areas where it's pretty much impossible to know everything that's available. Things that used to be the standard become obsolete or go out of production. New tools are being manufactured that are rendering old tools obsolete. It's just a constantly evolving area. So and one person that's very important to involve in this discussion is the student themselves, making sure that their voice is heard in these discussions. So when decisions are made um, without the student's input, that's when you get into the situation where the chosen device may not reflect the preferences of the student, and that can lead to device abandonment, which we really don't want to happen. So the actual the actual trial itself, think back to the task that was identified during the set process and the data that you're going to take to show that the students demonstrated is if they're making improvements in completion of that task. So during the trial, we're not just collecting data on mastery of a tool, but we're looking to see if the tool is a good fit for the student in order to facilitate meeting their IEP goal. So the student might need an extended period of time to thoroughly learn how to use the tool. So depending on how complicated the tool is to learn, you're not gonna you're not gonna want to do a short trial if the student has to learn how to use the tool first before you can even see if the tool is a good fit. So make sure that you give them enough time to not only use the tool to try to become successful with the task, but also to learn how to use the tool to begin with, because it's a new thing to them. All right. Some data that you might take could include increasing independence in the use of the tool, or it might be success in the task that's been identified, um, or increasing accuracy and demonstrating knowledge on a certain topic. All right. And if the device is not effective, then you might need to go back to that part 3 of the VATS guide, um, or you might need to use the AT resource guide to find other sources or other sources to find another tool, and set a new time frame for to trial the next tool. So just be sure that you're always considering any services that are needed. In any scenario, it could be the team that is going to be determining if more depth of information is needed. If that's the case, the team could request maybe a consultation um, by an AT team member, or they might um, they might even need an in-depth AT assessment. Where it gets documented again, this is something that varies by division. Like I mentioned, Virginia is a little bit loose with prescribing how it has to be done. It just has to be documented in the IEP, but different divisions put it different places. It could be it can be done in the present level of academic achievement section. It could be in the accommodations and modifications. It sometimes appears in the related services or in the testing accommodations. I would say most often it's in accommodations and modifications or in the present level. Uh, Now, here is in the process of developing the IEP. The school must contact the parents in writing to request consent and invite the parents to all the IEP meetings, of course. Here are some places that you can uh, find some of the resources that I've been referencing. So this is TTAC Online is that middle website. The VDOE website is the one on the left. And then the one on the right, you guys, unless you're TTAC fans, you might not have visited before. This is the AT Network site. This is a group subgroup of TTAC, and you can actually find links to all three of these places and lots of great information here. Um, Here is contact information for your GMU TTAC, including where places to follow us on social media. And I was told to leave about the last 15 minutes of this session for questions. I think I did okay. So, any questions?
You did great, Jeff. Thank you so much. We had a couple folks come in midway, so I'm going to just again paste one more time the link to oops, not that. Wrong, let's see. Wrong paste. Here we go. This is the link to the slides where you can find all of these. And I think those slides, even though they're in PDF, they are hot linked, Jeff. So all of the references you made to additional documents should be able to be easily found there. So I am going to take a look and see if there are any questions in the chat. We have a small group, small cozy group tonight. So I want to, if folks, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording. So thanks to those who are watching this and recording. We're going to stop you here.